The sound of roaring engines echoed down Millstone's main road that crisp Sunday morning. The small town was still rubbing the sleep out of its eyes when the Iron Hearts Brotherhood rumbled through, their motorcycles gleaming in the golden sunrise. To outsiders, they looked intimidating: leather jackets, tattooed arms, mirrored sunglasses, loud bikes. But to those who knew them, the Iron Hearts weren't a gang, they were a family. Ex-soldiers, mechanics, medics, and people who'd seen the worst of life, now spending their time helping anyone in need. At the head of the pack was Rick Ryder Dalton, a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver streaks in his beard and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was the kind of man people respected before they even knew why. Beside him rode Jake, a former paramedic, and Maya, a trauma nurse with a fearless streak. Their engines quieted as they rolled to a stop at the edge of town, near the dirt road that wound toward the old farmhouse region. That's when Rick saw her. A little girl, no older than 11, came sprinting toward them barefoot, in pajama pants and a t-shirt too big for her small frame. Her blonde hair was tangled, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She waved both arms wildly, screaming something over the sound of the bikes. Rick immediately raised his hand. The engines died down to a low rumble, then silence. The only sound was the girl's ragged breathing. "Please," she sobbed. "Please help me. My grandpa. He fell. He's not moving." Rick swung off his bike without a second's hesitation and knelt to her level. Hey, it's okay. Breathe, sweetheart. Where's your grandpa?" "In the shed, behind the house. I can't wake him up," she cried, pointing down the dirt road. "Please hurry." Rick didn't need to ask twice. He turned to his crew. "Jake, Maya, you're with me. The rest of you block the road and call an ambulance. Let's move." The bikers didn't waste a heartbeat. Maya grabbed the trauma bag she always carried. Jake slung his first aid pack over his shoulder. They followed the girl, Lily, as she said between breaths, down the winding path toward a weathered white farmhouse with a sagging porch. The shed behind the house leaned slightly to the left, its wooden door wide open. A ladder lay on the ground, splintered. Inside, sprawled on the floor next to a toppled toolbox, was an elderly man in overalls. "Grandpa!" Lily screamed, rushing toward him. Jake got to him first, gently checking his pulse. Weak but present, he murmured. "Shallow breathing. Possible head trauma. Maya, airway check." Maya crouched, moving fast and steady. "Airway clear. Let's stabilize his neck." Rick guided Lily back. "Let them work, Lily. They know what they're doing." Tears spilled down the girl's cheeks. "He was fixing the roof. I told him to wait until morning, but he said the storm last night made it worse. Then I heard a crash and found him like this." Rick squeezed her shoulder. "You did the right thing running to us." Outside, the rest of the bikers had already blocked the narrow road, making sure the ambulance could get through without delay. The sound of distant sirens soon reached their ears. Inside, Jake and Maya worked like they were born for this: steady compressions, oxygen mask, stabilizing his position. By the time the paramedics arrived, the old man was already breathing more steadily. "Vitals are better than expected," one paramedic noted in surprise. "Who stabilized him?" Jake raised a hand casually. "Just passing by." They loaded the old man onto the stretcher, and Lily ran to grab Rick's hand. Thank you so much." Rick knelt so they were eye to eye. "You're brave, Lily. We just helped out. He's got a real good chance now." But as the paramedics carried the stretcher out, Rick's soldier instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. He stepped back into the shed, scanning the scene. The ladder wasn't just knocked over. It had boot prints on one side, and the toolbox wasn't scattered like it had fallen, it was kicked. And there, near the wall, was something else, a muddy footprint. Not a work boot, a sneaker. Jake came back in. "You got that same feeling?" Rick nodded slowly. "This wasn't an accident." Maya's voice lowered. "You think someone hurt him?" "I don't think," Rick said. "I know." They followed the ambulance into town, their engines flanking it like a convoy. But Rick's mind wasn't on the road. It was on Lily. That girl had no parents. Her mom had died when she was a baby, and her dad had walked out years ago. Her grandpa was all she had. And if someone tried to take him out, that meant she might be next. At the hospital, Lily sat in a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, hugging her knees. Rick walked up slowly, his leather jacket creaking. "How's he doing?" he asked the nurse at the desk. "Stable but unconscious," the nurse replied. "They're running tests." Rick turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, did your grandpa have any trouble with anyone? Anybody been around the house lately?" She sniffled, wiping her nose. There was a man last night. I saw him from my window. He was yelling at Grandpa on the porch. I think they were fighting about the land. What land? Rick asked gently. Our house. The farm. Grandpa said he'd never sell it. He said it's been in the family forever. Rick's jaw tightened. Land disputes in small towns had turned deadly before. Did you see his face? She nodded. He had a tattoo on his neck. A snake. And a red truck. Rick stood. Maya, stay with her. Jake, you're with me. They roared out of the hospital like thunder. It didn't take long to find the red truck. It was parked behind McCafferty's diner, where half the town drank their morning coffee. Sitting at the counter was a man in his 40s, wearing a dirty cap and a sleeveless shirt. A snake tattoo coiled up his neck. Rick walked in like a storm. The man turned, smirking. Well, look who. Rick grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall so fast no one even blinked. You were at the Miller farm last night, he growled. The smirk faltered. I don't know what you're. Rick pushed harder. Ladder. Shed. Grandpa. Talk. The man tried to shove him off, but Jake stepped in, his voice cold. We already called the sheriff, pal. And we know you were there. Snake tattoo, red truck. You left your footprint at the scene. Try again. The man's face went pale. Look, I didn't mean to hurt him, all right. I just wanted to scare the old man. He wouldn't sell. I pushed the ladder. I didn't think. You didn't think. Rick hissed. You almost killed him. Before things could escalate further, the sheriff walked in. Someone at the diner had already called. The biker gang might have had a reputation, but Rick wasn't about to take the law into his own hands. He shoved the man toward the sheriff. He confessed, Rick said simply. You'll find the rest at the scene. The sheriff nodded grimly. Good work, Rick. Hours later, Lily stood at her grandfather's bedside as he slowly opened his eyes. Grandpa, she cried, clutching his hand. He squeezed back weakly, a tired smile on his face. You did good, sweetheart. Rick stood at the door with Jake and Maya, arms crossed. The nurse had explained everything. Because Lily ran for help so fast, and because the bikers acted like trained medics, her grandfather survived what could have been fatal. The sheriff had arrested the man with the snake tattoo. Turns out he was a developer trying to pressure old Mr. Miller to sell the farm for a resort project. When threats didn't work, he decided to make an accident happen. But he didn't count on Lily and the Iron Hearts. Outside the hospital, the sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and red. Rick stood by his bike, tightening his gloves. Lily ran out, her shoes scuffing on the concrete, and threw her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered. Rick's voice softened. You were the real hero today. You didn't give up. The rest of the bikers revved their engines, forming a line down the hospital driveway. As Lily watched, they saluted her, not with words, but with a roar of engines and a raised fist. The townsfolk who had once whispered about those scary bikers saw something different that night. They saw a family that stood up when no one else would. They saw how a little girl's cry for help was answered not with fear, but with courage. Mr. Miller eventually recovered, and Lily stayed with him on the farm. The town rallied to protect the land from greedy hands. And the Iron Hearts, they didn't ask for thanks. They just rode on, because that's what they did. They didn't just ride for the open road. They rode for people, and on that Sunday morning, when Lily ran barefoot and crying down the dirt road, she didn't know she was running straight toward the people who would save not just her grandpa, but her future. The engines of a dozen motorcycles thundered through the quiet streets of Millstone, a sleepy rural town wrapped in the golden light of early morning. Birds scattered from telephone lines as the riders approached, leather jackets, roaring Harleys, and mirrored sunglasses gleaming like metal eyes. To most onlookers, they looked like trouble. But the Iron Hearts Brotherhood wasn't a gang. They were a family, ex-soldiers, medics, mechanics, and people who'd seen hard times, now using their strength to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. At the head of the group rode Rick, Ryder, Dalton, a man with a grizzled beard, calm eyes, and a scar that hinted at old battles. He wasn't one for small talk, his actions did the speaking. The bikers were on their way to a charity ride for the town's children's hospital when, out of nowhere, a small figure darted into the road. Rick slammed the brakes, gravel spitting under his tires. The group came to an immediate halt, engines sputtering down to silence. It was a young girl, no more than 11 or 12, barefoot, in pajama pants, tears streaking her face. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. Please, she cried, voice trembling. Please, help me. My grandpa, he fell. He's not moving. Rick was off his bike before she'd even finished. Where is he? He asked, crouching so his eyes met hers. In the shed, by the woods. Please hurry, she said, pointing frantically down a narrow dirt road. Rick turned to his crew. Jake, Maya, with me. The rest, block traffic and call 911. The bikers moved like a well-oiled machine. Jake, a former paramedic, grabbed his emergency bag from his saddlebag, while Maya, a trauma nurse, followed close behind. They raced after the girl, whose name, they soon learned between sobs, was Lily. Her home appeared through the trees, a weathered white farmhouse, its porch sagging with age. Behind it stood a shed, door flung open, the sound of a loose hinge creaking in the wind. There, Lily screamed, sprinting ahead. Inside the shed, an elderly man in overalls lay crumpled beside a fallen ladder, his face pale and still. A wrench rested a few inches from his outstretched hand. Jake dropped to his knees instantly. Sir, can you hear me? He called, checking for a pulse. Weak, but it's there, he muttered, before starting CPR. Maya knelt beside him. Head wound, possible spinal trauma, she said, examining the gash near the man's temple. We need to stabilize his neck. Rick pulled Lily back gently, shielding her from the sight. Hey, he said softly, you did the right thing, running for help. Tears streamed down her cheeks. He's all I have left. Please don't let him die. Rick looked her straight in the eyes. We won't. Minutes later, the air filled with the wail of approaching sirens. The rest of the bikers had cleared the narrow road, creating a makeshift corridor for the ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, they were stunned to find the old man stabilized, airway cleared, and vitals strong. Who did all this? One asked. Jake shrugged modestly. Just passing through. As they loaded Lily's grandfather onto the stretcher, she ran to Rick, throwing her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered. You saved him. Rick smiled faintly. You saved him, kiddo. You found us. But as the ambulance drove off, Rick's eyes wandered back to the shed. Something didn't sit right. The ladder didn't look like it had fallen, it looked like it had been pushed. The toolbox wasn't scattered, it was kicked. And there, near the wall, he spotted a muddy footprint, not a work boot, but a sneaker. Jake noticed too. You thinking what I'm thinking? Rick's jaw tightened. Yeah, that wasn't an accident. The bikers exchanged looks. Their charity ride was forgotten. Something darker was unfolding in Millstone, and they were about to ride straight into the middle of it. Part 2. The secret behind the shed. The Iron Hearts followed the ambulance to Millstone General Hospital, their engines growling like thunder. Inside the emergency ward, Lily sat alone in a plastic chair, hugging her knees while nurses rushed around her. Rick approached quietly, crouching down beside her. Hey, Lily, he's in good hands now. The doctors are taking care of him. She nodded weakly. He always said he didn't trust hospitals, but I just want him to wake up. Rick hesitated. Then he asked, Lily, did your grandpa have any enemies? Anyone angry with him? Her lip trembled. There was a man last night. I heard them fighting on the porch. Grandpa said he'd never sell our farm. The man got mad. He said Grandpa would regret it. Rick's eyes darkened. You remember what he looked like? She nodded. He had a tattoo, a snake, right here. She touched her neck. And he drove a red truck. That was all Rick needed. He stood up. Maya, stay with her. Jake, you're with me. They left the hospital, engines roaring back to life. It didn't take long before they spotted a red truck parked behind McCafferty's Diner, a local spot where every rumor in town seemed to start. Sitting at the counter inside was a man with a beer belly, unshaven face, and a snake tattoo curling up his neck. Rick walked straight in. The man looked up, smirking. What's this, the circus in leather? Rick didn't bother with introductions. He grabbed the man by the collar, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the salt shakers. You were at the Miller farm last night, Rick growled. Who? What? The man sputtered, struggling. You crazy. Jake stepped forward, calm and cold. Red truck, snake tattoo, land dispute. Ring any bells? The man's smirk vanished. His eyes darted toward the back door, a mistake. Rick tightened his grip. You tried to scare an old man off his land, didn't you? You didn't count on his granddaughter showing up, or us. The man swallowed hard. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just pushed the ladder to teach him a lesson. He hit his head. I panicked. Rick's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You're lucky he's alive. The bell over the diner door jingled. The sheriff walked in. Apparently, someone had called when they saw the commotion. Rick released the man, shoving him toward the sheriff. Confessed to assault. You'll find evidence in the shed. The sheriff nodded. Appreciate the tip, Dalton. We'll take it from here. As the deputies led the man away, Rick felt no triumph, only relief. He'd seen too many men like that, bullies hiding behind money and greed. He was glad this one would face justice. Later that evening, the bikers returned to the hospital. Lily was there, curled in a chair beside her grandfather's bed. When she saw them, she jumped up, wiping her eyes. He's awake, she said, her voice breaking with joy. Mr. Miller's eyes fluttered open, weak but full of recognition. You must be the ones my Lily found, he rasped. Rick smiled. You've got one brave granddaughter, sir. The old man chuckled softly. She takes after her grandma. Stubborn as a mule. When Rick told him about the man's arrest, the old man's face hardened. He's been after this land for years. I told him no amount of money could make me give it up. My wife is buried here. I wasn't leaving her behind. Maya put a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. You're both safe now. Word spread fast through Millstone. By sundown, the entire town knew what had happened, how a group of bikers saved an old man's life and caught the man who tried to kill him. The same townspeople who once crossed the street to avoid the Iron Hearts now waved at them with gratitude. That evening, as the bikers prepared to leave, Lily ran outside, clutching a small wooden box. Wait, Rick turned, smiling. What's that, kiddo? It was my grandpa's, she said shyly. He says it's lucky. I want you to have it. Rick opened the box. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden heart. Simple, but beautiful. He swallowed hard, nodding. Thank you, Lily. We'll keep it safe. When they rode out that night, the townspeople lined the main road, cheering. Engines thundered in unison, a sound that once meant fear now meant hope. And as the Iron Hearts disappeared into the horizon, Lily stood beside her grandfather on the porch, watching the dust settle. Grandpa, she whispered, I thought they were scary at first. The old man smiled faintly. Sometimes, the people who look the scariest are the ones who protect us the most. She looked up at the fading road and whispered, thank you, bikers. And somewhere down that road, Rick Dalton smiled, because even though no one would ever know it, that one moment had reminded him why they rode in the first place. Not for glory, not for fear, but for the call for help that no one else would answer.